All right, good morning, everyone. It is day 3 of programming basics. We're going to go over loops and operators this morning. The other pillar I said of programming was loops, so we'll go over that today. We'll break out into groups afterward and dive into our assignments right away. Our loop-de-loop assignment, which is related to this lecture, and level 4 and 5 of the Algo app if you haven't reached it yet. And then in this afternoon, we're covering functions and parameters. So now we're going to be able to take our if statements, our for loops, and package them into an official JavaScript function. Okay, so let's go ahead and start on this morning's topic. All right, let's get started. Before we dive in, does anyone have any questions about anything in particular? Nothing? Okay, great. Let me adjust my zoom here so that you can see your guys' face. Okay. Cool. So this morning's topic is for loops. All right. So who can tell me what a for loop is or what it does? Something about a for loop that we can describe.
It's for when you want to do a repetitive action.
Yes, okay. For repetitive actions. What else? Repetitive action. Anyone else give me a description for what's the purpose? What is it? What does it do?
It's usually for if you know how many times you need something to loop.
Right. So this is, yes, all right, let's write that down. To loop through something. Okay, and I think that's a good enough descriptor for now. What a for loop is a way of reading something or doing a repetitive action so many times by the number of times you would define it, okay? So let's say, for example, we wanted to console log hello, just the word hello 5 times, okay? So we could do something like this, console.log hello. Okay, and then we'd have to do it again. So we do this 5 times and we get 5 console logs. But is there a way to automate this process so that the machine can just do it for me as many times as I need it for it to do? Well, yes, there is. This is what we're going to introduce today. Okay, so let's back up for a second and think of let me ask you guys a question. What is this asking me? Not now. Okay, back to camera. Let's ask a question. Have you guys, has anyone here been to an arcade in, like, let's say the 90s or early 2000s? Has anyone ever been to an arcade in those decades? Yeah, I see a few raised hands. And if you go to an arcade in those decades, you'll notice there is a particular dancing game, right? I'm no good at it, but I've noticed it. It's a dancing game called it's called Dance. Oh, that's not a D.
Dance Revolution?
Yes, DDR, Dance Dance Revolution. And in the dancing game, there's like these steps that you can step on, up, down, left, right. And depending on what the screen tells you to step on at that point in the song, you step on that arrow and then you make those steps. Well, I could never play that game. I'm no good at it. But what we're going to introduce today is the for loop dance. Okay, I'm going to call it the for loop dance because I think of it as something like a dance. And it requires a number of steps you have to memorize. Okay, it's not too complex. But here we go. Let's get started with it. Don't get overwhelmed. It's just maybe I'll call it 7-step, or we'll divide it into 2. Let me explain what I mean. Okay, so we're gonna call it the for loop dance.
Are you supposed to be sharing a screen?
Oh, am I not? Whoops.
No.
Yeah, I switched to my face because I had nothing to show for a second. Okay. So here it is, the for loop dance, and here are the steps. Okay, it's going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4 step, and then a 1, 2, 3. Okay, and the first time, only the first time, do we do this 1, 2, 3, 4 step. Okay, only the first time, and then the rest of the times do we do the 1, 2, 3 step. Okay, so the first time we do the 1, 2, 3, 4 step, the second time we do the 1, 2, 3 step, every other time besides the first. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 the first time, every other time we do 1, 2, 3. Okay, just have that in mind. Now we'll go through the for loop. Okay, so I'm going to take this for loop. I'm going to write it down on the blackboard. So let me just copy this for a reference somewhere. And let me share the screen again. Okay, so I'm going to just write this for loop. And then I'm going to show us how to read it / T-diagram it. Okay, so here's the for loop. So first, we start with the keyword for. Okay, and remember, all programming comes down to if statements and for loops. So yesterday, we covered if statement. It's going to check if something is true or not, A or B, and then it's going to react to that. Or it may have an else or else if specific. This one is a different category, but we're going to combine them together later on. So this is the second pillar. So let's just memorize how this looks, and then we'll understand how to work it. Okay, first let's get the big picture. All right, so for, that's the key word there, to indicate this is the start of a for loop. Right after the for, we open a parentheses and we write something inside. What goes in this parentheses is the instructions for how to run this for loop, where it begins, where it ends, how long it should continue for. Okay, so here are the steps. All right, so I'm going to make a for loop that begins at 0, ends at 5. As soon as it gets larger than 5, we're going to stop the for loop. Okay, we only want to console log something 5 times. Remember, this is our shortcut for code, to console log 5 times hello. So what we can do is we open the for loop and then we declare a variable to begin with. This variable is our starting point. Var, and we'll say num. Okay, this is what we're calling our starting point. It's a variable called num, and we make it to equal 0. Okay, this is our starting point. This is step 1 when reading our for loop. Okay, this is the first thing we read when reading our for loop. Okay, this is the first time we're reading it / building it. So I'm just giving the steps as I write it out. Okay, and then we have how long we're going to iterate, how long the for loop is going to last. What's the process of the for loop? Okay, and we're going to say while num is less than or equal to 5. Okay, and as you notice, there's these semicolons here. these semicolons divide the different sections, steps, instructions for the for loop that I want us to follow, okay? So here we have the next section, and I'll number the rest of the steps right after this, okay? And then we have the rest of the instructions here inside the for loop, which is num plus plus, close the parentheses, okay? Now the instructions are complete for how long the for loop, where it begins, how long it lasts, how long it increases, and then, well, by what it would increase by, and then we would start the do something section, okay? And here, okay, is where we would do something. We're going to console log hello. Okay, and that's done. Put a semicolon. Okay. So let's go through the steps. What are we looking at here? This is the first step, okay? And I'll make a T diagram at the top right of the page. I'll make it yellow colored here. So we have our var and we have our value. So we read that the first variable here, num, is 0. So num is equal to 0 right now. Then the second step, this is still the first time we're reading it, right? So we're reading, let me mark that somewhere. Now we're on the first step, okay? The first step is in red. So step 1, we note the variable that we're starting with. This is num 0. So far it's just a T diagram, right? We're reading a variable, we're noting it. And then we look, the second step is to look at this center section of the for loop, okay? This is step number 2. We're going to read this, and we're going to read the rule. The rule says, if num is less than or equal to 5, if this is true, then we enter the do something section, okay? And this is step 3. Well, that's a weird looking 3, but it'll live. It's step 3 here. Okay, once if this is true here, then we enter. Okay, so let me just write something here. If true, enter. So we enter step 3. We console log hello. Okay, so let me write my console somewhere. I'm going to write it at this bottom section here. So we got hello. We consoled it. We finished step 3. And then our eyes should go to step 4. And it says num plus plus. What num plus plus means is increase num by 1. Okay. So now we will increase num by 1. Num's value changes to 1. Okay. Num's value changes to 1. And we have finished the first step. Okay. So the first step is complete. We did the 1, 2, 3, 4. From now here on out, we're going to do the 1, 2, 3 step. Okay. So let me find a new color here. I'm going to pick green. All right. So green is going to be our 1, 2, 3 step. Did I get the color I needed? Yes. Okay. Hopefully we can differentiate between blue and green. Okay. So we finished the first. Now we're going to do the second. second step. And from here on out, it's just going to be the 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'll make this 1, 2, 3, 4. The green is 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we finished the first step. Now our eye should go to, as soon as we increase num, then this becomes the 1. Okay, we check this. Is num less than or equal to 5? Right now, num is 1. It is still less than 5. So this is true. So then we enter, and this becomes our new number 2. So now we do something, and we log hello the second time. Once we finish that, this is our third step. We increase num. We increase num, and now it's 2. Now that it's 2, we go back to step 1, the green step. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 until we're done. Okay. First step is the red, follow the red, 1, 2, then we enter 3, enter if it's true, 3, and then 4. Once we've increased it, then we check here to see if it qualifies again. After we've increased it, then we enter the do something section. If true, increase again. Check it, do something section, increase again until we finished our loop. And we'll do that until we get 5 hello. So let's go ahead and finish it. I'm just giving you a preview of where we're going here. So num is now 2. Num is still less than or equal to 5. So we console log hello. Okay, we console log a third time. We increase num again. So num's now 3. 3 is less than 5. So we enter the do something section. We console log hello. And then we increase num again. And I think actually we're going to get more than 5 hellos here. And I'll explain why. So then we check it. Is 4 less than 5? Yes. Then we enter here, console log hello. So we write it, hello. Increase num again. Now num is 5. Is num less than or equal to 5? Yes. Num is equal to 5. So then we enter one last time, console log hello. Okay, we get our 6th console log. And the reason we get 6 is because we started at 0 here. Okay, then we increase num again. Now 6. Is num, which is now 6, less than or equal to 5? It is no longer true. That is not true. Num is not less than or equal to 5. So we've finished. We finished our for loop. As soon as this section here, if it's no longer true, finished. Okay, let me write an arrow. If no longer true, we're finished. I know I got a little messy at the end, but this is basically it. So we read it the first time, we take note of num. This is the first thing we look at. We check if it qualifies. If it qualifies, we enter. Then we say, okay, then we want to do something, right? So we console log hello, and that's our first console log here. We increase num, and now it's 1. Then we follow the green steps. We go to the middle. Is 1 less than or equal to 5? Yes. Okay. So then we enter here, we console log hello. That's our second console log. We increase it again, and now we're at 2. And we do this until we reach 6. 6 is going to be the number that makes this thing break, right? Because num at 6 is not less than or equal to 5. So then at that point, we know we've finished the for loop. We've done everything we were supposed to do. And in the end, we get 6 hellos, not 5. So excuse me on that. I just copied it from the platform, but 6 hellos, close enough. Okay. Now let's take a poll check to see how well this is being understood. Okay. Does anyone want to take a screenshot before I destroy all this? I'm going to destroy it right now.
Wait. Can I take a screenshot?
Yeah, it'll also be in the recording, so you can take it from there. as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So we'll work more with for loops and it'll become more familiar. I know it kind of seems a little bit like, a little overwhelming at first because we're firstly introduced to this, but it's really the way that we read it. As soon as our eyes catch on to how it should be read, it'll be a no-brainer soon. T-diagramming will be a breeze. Okay. So we've limited the number of times we wanted to console log num, but in this case, instead of console logging hello, they've console logged num itself. Num is the index. This first starting point is basically the point at which the index is on the for loop. Okay, here we're starting at index or the value of being 0. Sorry, not index yet. We're not dealing with arrays, but this value is 0. Okay, num is 0. We make it less than or equal to 5, so we know we're going to stop as soon as num equals 6. We increase num by 1, and each time this qualifies, when we increase it by 1, we're going to console log num. So that's going to give us a value of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when num goes to 6, we can no longer console log it. Okay. So it'll take a day or two for this to sink in. If it's the first time seeing it. I remember that's how it was for me. Now let's go through some loop tips here. Let me specify something here. Whenever we see something like this, let's create a variable var num equals 0. Okay, and if we say num plus, this is shorthand for num equals itself plus 1. We're just increasing it by 1. Num plus plus is the same as saying make num equal itself plus 1. Okay, so when you see that at the end of the for loop, it could be either looking like something like this, a shorthand, or a longer version.
Could you give us an example of if it was like num plus 3 and it would incrementally increase by a different number than 1?
Yes. Okay, so what we can do, I'll write it to the right here of it so we can see an example. So we're going to increase by 3. Okay, we can say num, this is shorthand, plus equals 3. If you put the plus sign before the equal sign and then you write a 3 after the equal sign, that will say that's the equivalent of saying num equals num plus 3. Good question. Glad you asked. So shorthand, and this is also the long version. Okay, does that answer it?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. All right. So had to make a note of that. And let's look at a couple more rules when it comes to for loops. Let's turn our eyes to this here. Counter minus minus. We can do the same thing. Instead of saying, let's say var num equals 1. If we say num minus minus, what do you think that will do? What should the output?
Decrease it by one
Yes.
value.
Yes, so num should now be 0. Num should now be 0 after we decrease it, okay? And it's the same rule that applies to plus signs as it does to minus signs. So if you want to write a shorthand for another number besides 1, then you would say num minus equals 3, for example, if it was going to be the number 3 that you're chopping it down by. Okay. You can also do multiplication. You can increase that counter by multiplying it by a number. You don't have to do addition or subtraction. You can also do division. Divide equals 2 means you're dividing that number by 2. Okay, so if the counter was 18 before this, if you say counter divide equal 2, then it's going to divide 18 by 2, and the outcome would then be 9. And I think we're getting a pretty good grip of this one. All right, let's try and take this for loop now. And we're going to run this. We're going to T-diagram this ourselves again together. And then after that, we're going to run it on our code runner to see if we did it correctly. Okay, so we have a for loop, for, and then we have our starting point, var num equals 10. And then we're going to say, well, num is greater than 2. We're going to say num minus minus. And then we enter the do something section here. And now this time, I want you guys to guide me on how to read this for loop. Okay, and then we're going to console log num is currently, currently, and then comma, and then the num. Okay, so here's our T diagram. Here's our console. Okay, and I need some volunteers. So let's dissect this for loop, and let's start T-diagramming it. So what's our first step? Someone guide me.
Set num to 10.
Okay, so we have a num variable. Its value is 10, and that's because we read this. That's our first step. We read this, var num equals 10, and we noted that on our T diagram. Okay, what's our next step?
To
Is
check if
10
10
more
is
than
greater.
Okay,
Sorry, saying the same thing.
I didn't hear any of it. What was it? Sorry.
Checking if 10 is greater than 2.
Okay, this is our next step here. Is num greater than 2? Num is 10. 10 is greater than 2. This is true. So then what happens? What do we do from here?
You decrease 10 to 9.
Okay, well, before we do that, we have to do something else. Before we decrease, what do?
We console log the
Console log, right?
Yes,
String.
because if this is true, we notice this is true, the very next thing is we enter this section. We enter the do something section if it's true, right? This is the gate, this is the gatekeeper, this is the door, all right? This decides if you enter this area, okay? This area is where we want to enter. If true, then enter. This is true, so we want to enter this, and we're going to console log. Num is currently, so num is currently, and just write like scribbles here for currently, and then we say the num, and so num is 10, and so that's what it would log in the console at this point. Okay, now what's our next step? After we've done the do something, what do we do now?
Then subtract by 1.
Right, then after we do this do something section, then we look, we have our eyes to change num. Okay, the order matters, and it's just a matter of getting that muscle memory as soon as you do it enough times. Okay, so now we've decreased num by 1 because we've noticed it's minus minus. So num is now 9. What do we do now?
Repeat the loop.
Okay, right. So now we're on our 1, 2, 3 step. And so what do we want to do? So we talked over each other. It's a good thing, but let's say it again.
Repeat the loop.
Right. So how do we do that?
So we check to see if it's greater than 2.
Now that's what I want. Okay, let's check. Let's repeat the loop by checking, is num greater than 2? Num is 9 because we just decreased it. It's greater than 2. That's true. So if true, then enter. Okay, let me write that. If true, comma, then enter. Okay, so we enter, and it says console log num is currently. So we say num is currently 9. As soon as we've done this do something section, then what?
We subtract.
Repeat. Yes, we subtract. We subtract again. We check again. Is num greater than 2? Yes, num is still greater than 2. So we repeat this until we get to 8. We decrease again. Let's move it to 7. Is num greater than 2? So we do this all the way until we get to 8, 9, 8. Well, I'm going back up. 6, 5, 4. I'm running out of writing space. 3. We write it, num is 3, and then when we get to 3, we decrease. And as soon as num is 2, 2 is not greater than 2. So then we exit, okay? So we only get to see in the console num is currently from 10 all the way to 3. And that's how we decrease through a for loop. Okay, that's how we decrease through a for loop. Okay. Let's run another pulse check. And then once we do this, I'm going to do one more for loop with you guys. Okay. And after this, we're going to go over operators. We have one more for loop that we're going to go over. Okay.
Hey, Josh.
Yes.
So the where I got tripped up was like, I'm understanding kind of the anatomy and then the execution of the for loop.
Right.
It was then the, when we in the assignment, it's kind of the real world application. And like, I got all kinds of flummoxed on that. And I watched the video like 3 different times. I'm like, that didn't even help at all. And so that's where I kind of have got some anxieties. I'm like, well, I understand like exactly what you're doing, like step for step.
Yeah.
It's the plug and play of the information. So I don't know if I'm alone on that, but that's just kind of where I'm at.
When you say plug and play of the information, do you mean like writing it out yourself to solve a problem? Writing out a for loop that would be...
Yeah. Yeah, like so, like when you're doing it, you're kind of already adding the index values. You're just saying, hey, we're going to make, the var num, we'll make it 10 or 0, or and then from there the next index of, if num is greater than, we'll say 3 times or whatever. So like when you're doing that, I follow exactly what you're saying, or at least what you're doing. It's just the next part of it is actually extrapolating that, because I'm just going towards the assignment when
Yeah.
that's where I'm like, oh crap. like I knew what they were asking. It was just that translation, I guess, is probably what I'm looking for. So
Right. And so for now, because we've just freshly introduced it to you, we're giving you a new tool, and now you have to figure out, what application do I use this tool, right? Like, how do I put this into practice? And for now, we just need to know how to read it, how,
Okay.
let's just figure out how it works, and then we'll start applying. We'll give you specified problems as we know that you have the skill. For example, if we wanted to build a for loop that would say console log hello 5 times, we just wanted to console log hello 5 times. Now we know how to write a for loop to do that, at least, right? We know how to start it at 0, we stop it at 5, we increase it by 1 each time, and for each time it increases, we'll do a function, we'll do console log. So at least at this point, we know we can make a for loop, start at a point, end at a point, and how many, and increase by how much. And so using that, now we can do a certain action by a certain number of times. Now we know how to do that. So our first utility is to repeat an action by a number of times. So we can do that now, okay? The other purpose of a for loop, in addition to repeating an action by a number of times, we can repeat an action by a number of times of something in an array. So now, do you remember how an array looked? It was something like this. Var R, okay, I'm just going to call it R for array. And then we have an open bracket, and then we have, let's say, strings or numbers. I'll just put a random number of strings. Okay. This is an array, right? We can use for loops not only to loop repeat an action by a number of times, but to repeat an action by a number of times of something in an array, or read through an array. Remember in our analogy yesterday, our virtual imaginary waitress, our representation of an app, our restaurant that's an app, is going to see the customers come through the door and read through the array of customers, the group of customers, the list of customers that come in a group together. Is going to read the family, right? Like, okay, 2 adults, 3 children. And in order to determine that, you have to read through an array of something, a list of something. So let's figure out how we can do that now. And yesterday's lesson is going to come into play about array.length and array.length -1. Now that's going to come into application when writing a for loop. So let's see how we do that. Okay. So let's create an array. I'm going to write the title at the top here. For loop, looping through an array. Okay, so we have our array var r equals, we open the bracket, close the bracket. Let's just put some things in here. 7, 5, 9, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now we have an array of random numbers, and what we want to do is loop through this. So let's start our for loop. We're going to say for the indication of we're building a for loop. after this for, we open the parentheses. The first thing we write is our starting point. And I'm gonna call it var I. And I stands for index. Okay. So I'm talking now about index positions. Remember how we have index positions 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's kind of in the middle of that word array there, but there are the numbers there. We're now noting what index we want to start at. Okay. I is 0. And we want to say, well, we're going to loop from left to right in this array. We're going to loop from left to right. So that's the goal. While I is less than, what do we want to put here? Well, I is less than what?
Array.length.
Okay, there we go. R, because that's the name of our variable, right? R dot length. And what number is R dot length? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to go through this loop 6 times, and this R dot length can change depending on if the array size changes or not. Okay. And we're going to go through each item in the array. So we're going to increase just by 1, I plus plus. Okay. Now we create the do something section. For var I equals 0, while I is less than array.length, I plus plus, I want to console log each value that I come across in the array. So how do I do that? How do I do that? See if anyone's responding in the chat that I'm not seeing here. Okay. Since no one's responding,
It's array square brackets I, right?
exactly. Perfect. When we say square brackets, we're saying we want this value at this position, this index position. So at index position I is going to increase as we run this for loop, right? So for each time I increases, we're going to console log array at that value at I. So we console log, let's create our console section, sorry, untied. All right. So R at I, when we start this, is at 0, right? So R at I, our array at 0 is 7. So our first console is going to be 7. And as we increase I would become 1. And then if I is less than array.length, is 1 less than array.length? Yes. So then we enter the do something section, R at I, which is now 1. The value is 5. So this is how we would iterate through an array and read each value, and now we can print each value. Now I can go through, increase it, now it becomes 2. Is a 2 less than the length? Yes. So then we enter and we console log array at 2. Array at 2 is 9, so then we console log 9. We do this to the end and we get the whole list. Okay, so that's how you read through an array using a for loop. Let's get some feedback on this poll. About how well we feel we understand that a for loop can now iterate through an array and print its values. Okay, we can do this one again if we need extra help.
Can we do that again?
Yeah, do you want to do it again? Let's do it again.
Yeah, please, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Looping through an array. Okay, so we have our array. Var r equals first entry is going to be a string with the word hello. Then the number 8. Then the string hi. And then the number 2. Okay, this is our array. It's a combination of strings and numbers. How are we going to loop through this? We have to build a for loop if we're going to loop through this. So let's build our for loop. We know it starts with the keyword for. And we want to start at the very beginning, right? We know this is index 0. So this would be the beginning index. 0 and separated by comma, this is index 1. Hi is index 2 and 2 is at index 3. Okay, so we want to start at 0. This is our starting point here. And then we're going to go from here to the end. And then we say var I for index equals 0. Okay, and then we close off this section. This is, we finished the first part. Let me just highlight it. Okay, then what do we write here? How long are we going to go? How long are we going to loop? And what's our endpoint?
5?
Okay, but what if it's not just a solid hard number 5, right? We need it to be adjusting to this specific array. This array may change. For now, they're giving us an array and it'll be 4, right? It's just a list of things. Maybe it's a list of members in a club, right? The member, right? So we want to say r.length. R.length. So while I is less than r dot length, because we're going to assume that LENGHTH. Oh, had some dyslexia there. Okay, and then we're going to increase I.
Josh, can we translate this to VS Code? I don't know if you want to do it now or after.
Yes, we'll do it in VS Code. Oh, and I forgot to run it in Trace. We have 10 more minutes in lecture, so we have plenty of time. And we're gonna console log. Index is comma, and then we're going to print, we'll say index value. Index value is, and then we're going to say R and I. Yeah, we'll get rid of my handwriting in just a second. Okay. Last time we'll do it on the blackboard here. So let's just get this over with. So we start at 0. Let's write our T diagram here. Var val. I starts at 0. Here's our first step. Then we check, is I less than array.length? Array.length is 4, 2 is less than 4, so we enter here. We console log index value is R at I, it is hello. We increase I++, and then we say, is I less than array.length? So we're supposed to increase this. Is 1 less than array.length? Yes. 1 is less than 4, so we enter. I val is, and then we say 8. Increase again. Okay, now I is 2, so we're here. We finish that. Now we check again. Is I less than array.length? Yes, 2 is less than 4. So we enter this section. Console log index value is I at 2 is high. Okay, so we console log that here. Increase again. And then I becomes 3. Is 3 less than array.length? Yes. So then we enter again and we console log index value is, and then R at I is 3, right? Because we have 3 here. We're looking at this 3 here. So it's 2. So we console log the last time. R at I is 2, and I'm running out of space. My computer's wigging out on me here. 2, and so then we increase again. The last time we increase, we go to the number 4 and we check, is I, which is 4, less than 4? Is 4 less than 4? No, 4 is equal to 4. So as soon as this is no longer true, 4 is not less than 4, so we stop. And so this is our result. Okay. I think we have time for one more for loop, and then we have to move on. How do we feel about for loop after this iteration, this run? A little better?
Yeah, a little better.
Okay. Okay. And what I want to do is do this here. I'm going to run it on. I'm going to test if trace is running. Paste my for loop in here, and let's see how this runs. Okay, let's break this down step by step. Step 1, it reads num equals 0. Okay. It's going so fast. Okay. As soon as it finishes that, we have our T diagram. Num is 0. You can see that fine, right? You guys can see that? As soon as this is true, is 0 less than or equal to 5? Yes. So then we enter console log num. As soon as that finished executing, we get our 0 in our console here, 0. Increase num again, num plus plus. So we're about to see this change from 0 to 1. And there it is. Then we check again. Is num, which is now 1, less than or equal to 5? Yes. So we're going to enter the do something section. Console log num. There it goes. I'm just going to let it play now. Increases to 3, checks it, logs it. 4, checks, logs, increase, log, increase, check. The check at the very last time, when num was 6, it no longer qualified. It recorded on its T diagram when num is 6, it no longer qualifies this condition, the center condition. And so it no longer enters this section, the do something section. And so our console just lists 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Last survey, and we are going to move on to a new topic. Okay, I think we're getting better numbers now. Okay, so we're going to go over operators, and if we're running out of time to do this, we'll save this for the next lecture. Where was it? Operators. Here we are. You know what? I think I will add this to this afternoon's lecture. The for loop took plenty of time, and this is its own 15-20 minutes of speaking, so I will leave it. I will leave it for next lecture. So that's what I'll do. I'm going to take this and move this down. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, it's that time we break out into groups. Do we have any questions about today's lecture before I end the recording? Okay, no questions. All right, then. So we'll break out into groups. We'll work on our assignment. If you're behind on assignments, work on what you need to catch up on. If you're ahead, that's totally fine too. But you should at least be on Code Challenge Loop-de-Loop. You should at least finish that by today in Algo app levels 4 and 5. Okay. To work on your own, take a lunch break, and then we meet again at 2. Okay. So again, you can drop into our office hours. David will have his own room, so there's more staff now that you can get help from. And after our lecture, we'll be doing more assignments. Okay, we're just catching up on assignments and pushing through to tomorrow, because tomorrow's our exam. Our exam is 10 questions. You have to get 8 out of 10. It's pass or fail. You get 3 attempts. So your first attempt will be after Thursday afternoon, and then you get 2 attempts on Friday. Okay. If you feel like you're going to need that 3rd attempt to pass, you're going to have to be able to take that 3rd attempt right after the 2nd one on Friday morning. Okay. Usually, you know, I notice students after their 2nd attempt are a little bit burnt out if they haven't finished it. So that 3rd one is going to be a tight squeeze. Just have that in mind. Okay, now, hopefully we don't get to that. We all pass on the first time, but the first belt is tomorrow after the afternoon lecture. Okay,
Quick
so we'll
question about the belt exam. With the belt exams, do we have access to all our notes? What resources should we not be using? Like if we had gone through example problems in our Algo app, can we reference our successful Algo app problems? Or is there stuff we shouldn't be accessing to kind of just help us recollect?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't want to specify yet. And there's a reason behind that. So I know it's kind of annoying, but I'm not going to give you specific directions until right before the exam tomorrow. Okay, we'll lay out the rules. And I it's not that I don't want you to prep enough or over prep or under prep. You should be just fine with this prep right before the lecture. So far, everyone's been able to do programming basics, at least all the classes I've taught. It's a super simple exam. Everything that we've been doing up to this point. Okay, I have total confidence you guys will be able to pass. So I hate to deflect that question, but I will until tomorrow, right before. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, guys. I'll go ahead and create the breakout groups. If we have no further questions, we'll take our 2nd attendance check to make sure you guys are working. And then our last attendance check will be at 2 today. Okay, let's stop the recording.